Hello my bunny besties! If you're new here, my name is Bunby, welcome, and if you are returning, hi, how are you? It is so nice to see you again. I'm finally back with another speed build, and this one is a doozy that took me a whole month to plan, build, and polish for today's video. Resident services is often a spot that can be the most challenging to work on, so in today's video I will be tackling a huge portion of our Tamagotchi inspired islands that I hope will bring a ton of inspiration for your own islands, no matter the theme that you're working on. This speed build will feature a handful of different micro builds and filler areas, so be sure to let me know which spot ends up being your favorite, and without further ado, let's jump in. With our hard hat secured and our pathing tools acquired, we are going to start things off with laying all of the sidewalk pathing and figuring out the direction of our roadways for this area. If this is the first video of mine that you're tuning into, then I will go ahead and give you a little warning that there is a lot, and I mean a lot, of pathing pieces to lay down, so for those that want to skip ahead to the decorating, feel free. I promise I won't be offended. I'll even put a little timestamp right here on screen to let you know when we start decorating. And for those who are just going along for the ride, then sit back, relax, and get cozy wherever you are, because the next 10 minutes is going to be a riveting display of my sheer willpower to place over 100 tiles of pathing without losing my mind. Or maybe I lost my mind a long time ago, so laying pathing is like the Animal Crossing equivalent of a lobotomy. Who knows? But per usual for my builds, I always find that figuring out the pathing first is the best way to give myself some parameters for whatever it is that I'm working on. This island is built out to be a cityscape, so that usually means a lot of industrial infrastructure planning has to go into the different areas that we puzzle piece together. Not that it's really that deep or anything, because this is just Animal Crossing after all, so it's not like there's really any taxpayer dollars going into road paving and urban upkeep. We all know that Tom Nook is the dictator of this town, but for any new viewers that are tuning in for the first time, welcome to Tamagotchi, our spring kidcore citycore island that is based off of childhood nostalgia and the Tamagotchi franchise, hence the name, which couldn't possibly be more on the nose. And if you couldn't tell already by the vibes and some of the villagers running around on screen, this island is very pastel, very sweet, very cutesy. And my goal with this island is to try and heal my inner child, and hopefully heal yours along the way as well, and really just to be a love note to the vibrant and fun vibes of the late 90s and early 2000s, which is the era that I personally grew up in. Working on this island has been so much fun, even if these builds are taking me a bit longer than usual just because of the sheer size of all of these areas being so massive. I don't know why I do it to myself, but I love to just tackle the biggest projects you have ever seen in Animal Crossing. But at the same time, the more work that I put into Tamagotchi, the more inspired I get to keep exploring new areas and new ways to piece everything together. I have been working on this island over on Twitch, and some of you have joined me over there, which first of all, thank you so much if you tune into our live streams, and it has just been so much fun to get input from you guys, and I swear I couldn't tackle some of these builds without the help and direction that some of you guys give me, so everyone give yourselves a little pat on the back for all of the help that you guys have given me for this island. I really appreciate it, and this is the 4th island that we've worked on for the channel, with 3 of those islands being a bit more urban in design. So my goal with this specific build was to try and figure out a new way to design resident services, just to keep myself from reusing old layouts that I've done in the past, and so that I can push myself while also delivering something fresh for anyone who is looking for some inspiration. Now, of course, the game has been out for almost 5 years now. We are coming up on the 5-year anniversary, which is absolutely crazy. I still can't believe that we are at the 5-year mark, but my goal is to try and do new builds whenever I can. It's very difficult because there's only so many items in game and only so many ways that you can piece those items together, but I hope that you can find some kernel of inspiration in today's video. But originally, when I was map hunting for this island, I decided that I wanted resident services to be close to the right side of the island, very much near the coastline, and sit just in front of one of the side-facing river mouths. I've never had a layout like that before. I usually put resident services smack dab in the middle of the island, so I wanted to kind of push myself and see if I could decorate a more beach-centered resident services. Not that this build ends up being beachy in any sort of way, but kind of just put it in an area that I've never had it in before. And the idea with all of that was to try and create a river sitting behind resident services, acting as a natural separation of space between my builds. But after choosing our map and starting the island, I remembered that our town hall for our first channel island of Pottsfield had a river running behind it. So at the last moment, I pivoted after some panicking, and that little oversight I think actually led to a really beautiful outcome. Decorating behind resident services is always the biggest challenge, since the building itself is so tall, which makes putting anything behind it somewhat of a chore because so many things get covered up by the building itself. But we end up creating a really cool shopping district skyline at the end of the video that I can't wait for you guys to see. For now though, we are just laying down the baseline for the pathing in this area, and like I mentioned, when working on a city core island like this, I've found that laying the roadway first and figuring out the flow of an entire area and where you want people to be able to walk when exploring is the best way to give yourself some parameters to work within for your actual decorating. And in this specific area, I faced a slight battle. In our entrance video, which if you haven't watched yet, I highly recommend checking out the Tamagotchi playlist that is linked in the description box down below, where you can also see how we planned out the island. We decided to tackle a giant highway build, which turned out so cool, and I couldn't have done it without you guys, except that when I started working on resident services, I then had to figure out how the highway would play into this build without overtaking the whole area, and how the road itself would end since resident services sits so close to the beach. And in my personal opinion, figuring out how a roadway ends is literally the hardest part of creating a city core island, because like, I don't know how roads in real life usually end. Do they even end? It's so rare to see the end of a road in an actual city unless it's like a neighborhood that ends in a cul-de-sac, or maybe some decrepit alleyway in a big city. I don't know. Usually everything just kind of like merges into a highway or turns off into a parking lot or something. So trying to find a natural stop for any type of road in Animal Crossing is a really big challenge for me. I feel like whenever people ask how to do a city core island, a lot of the questions that get asked are, you know, how do you figure out the roads? How do you know how to build stuff? How do you do fake buildings? But for me, the biggest question is, how the heck do you end the roads? Starting the road is easy, but how do you make it end? So I really tried to push myself and find a way to make this giant highway end. So I decided that creating a little intersection that would branch the highway off into some smaller side roads would be a great way to keep the natural flow going, while also conserving space with these side roads taking up a lot less tiles, because I think for reference, our highway takes up like 5 tiles just of roadway, not including the 2 sidewalk tiles bordering each side, which means that it's absolutely mammoth.
But she's so beautiful. She's a mammoth, of course. And she has blonde hair.
But I decided that the highway would end in some sort of a shopping district / parking lot area for resident services, but tried tackling it in a way that would be space saving, since those types of builds can be quite expansive. While we have a huge area to work with here, we also have a ton of buildings left that we haven't even integrated around the island. So I knew that we needed to start placing shops like Abel's to help check off our list. I always get so carried away when it comes to working on the entrance of an island, and I make it way too big, so that way I'm working with a lot tighter spaces around the rest of the island, and then I have to remind myself that I have 10 villager homes, my player home, and then I have 2 shops, a campsite, and a museum that I have to try and figure out how to puzzle piece together on the island, which makes things so stressful. But I did finally go through recently and plan out the rest of the island. We planned it out together on stream, which once again, if you would like to join, you can find me at Cozy Bunby over on Twitch. We're live every Wednesday and Friday with Animal Crossing and some other cozy games. And yeah, we worked together on planning out the island, which was super helpful. So now I'm super inspired to get things finished on Tamagotchi. But at the same time, I was sweating profusely trying to figure out how the heck I was gonna fit all of the buildings on this island. But to rein things in a little bit and get back to what we have going on here on screen, I'm trying to go through and just bring some variation to the pathing in this area. Sometimes when you are using a roadway, the same path over and over again can look very monotonous, and I just absolutely love the code that we are using for the roadway here on Tamagotchi. It has so many variations. Not only does it have these little leaf codes that I think are so cute, but there's also like little chalk designs, there's little notes that have been strewn across the ground, there's even like a little sock, which you'll see me play around with some of those in just a moment. And it's just been so fun to go through and have this roadway take up so much space, because there's just so many cute little variants that I can sprinkle all around the place. And it does also somewhat help with the island lag, which I will go ahead and let you know this island is a lag nightmare. It is lagging so bad. I sometimes run too fast and the items just will not load in. That is the joy of working on a very cluttered city island. My design style is definitely very cluttered. There is no tile left behind in any island that I work on. So going through and covering up all these tiles, having these variations so that way I can keep myself from just completely destroying my Switch with lag definitely helps to kind of rein myself in a little bit. But now we are shifting gears from the pathing to start defining some separate areas here near resident services, starting with this little parking parking lot off to the right hand side, which is very tiny, but I think it still gets the job done. I created this huge, almost pavilion-like space in front of the Resident Services town square because of how far back the building sits from the highway, so that left me with the very fun task of figuring out how the heck to fill this giant patch of concrete in a fun yet visually pleasing way, which if you've watched some of my previous videos, then you'll know that my best piece of design advice is that if an area is giving you trouble and the proportions feel off, shrink the build that you're working on, but still keep the same amount of items for a fuller look, which is the exact opposite of what I have going on here with this big old blob of sidewalk. So to help give myself some separate areas to work with, I decided to do this little parking lot for Isabel and Tom Crook to use as a place to post up their cars before heading in for their shift of good old-fashioned island bureaucracy. But I was just thinking about the types of filler that people will put on their island when they are needing to take up some space and transition from one area to another, and I feel like there are certain things that people will gravitate towards depending on what theme they're working on. So usually in cottagecore you'll find like a little laundry area, or you'll find like a picnic spot being the most used filler for different areas. But for city islands, I've noticed that my go-to filler is parking lots, which is interesting because it doesn't seem like it would be necessarily a filler type thing to add to an island, but that was just a silly little thing I noticed. Now we can finally move on to giving some variation to the sidewalks itself. Obviously we have the road variations done, it's looking very cutesy, but now we have to try and break up the monotony of the sidewalks itself. Of course, the sidewalks don't need nearly as much because the fact that we will have the opportunity to place more items on the sidewalk than we will on the road. I try to keep the roadways pretty clear just because I want you to be able to actually use the roads to navigate the island instead of using the sidewalks. But even though we're filling up the sidewalks with items, I still want to try and give us a lot of variation, so that way if we place an item down, we can have some fun things peeking out underneath the item and really just give you lots of fun stuff to look at as you are exploring. Which, if you're also sitting here looking at the screen going, Bunby, what the heck, why are you putting the tiles where you're putting them? I'm gonna let you in a little secret. There is no rhyme or reason. I am just placing tiles willy-nilly wherever I feel like there needs to be one. I will admit, looking at the footage, it does look very messy and very repetitive, but I promise once the actual items start coming into play, some of these will be covered up and it will look a lot cleaner. I'm also going through and using the little flower variation of the sidewalk, which is what I've been putting underneath our street lamps, and I'm going through and placing those around where I know I want the street lamps to go. I'm trying to keep all the street lamps very symmetrical because I feel like, you know, when you drive down a road in real life, the street lights tend to be symmetrical on either side of the road. So I'm just keeping that in mind as I'm going through and placing that. But now I'm just finishing off the tile variation by going through and placing down this super cute little letter code. It does kind of insinuate that some of the villagers are littering, and I feel like I placed this code down a little bit too much, but once again, it'll be covered up a little bit later, so just trust the process. And I'm finishing out our sidewalk manicuring by placing down a tile variant. This is a completely different tile because I know in this little corner area I want to put almost like a little public park, which you'll see come together. It's one of my favorite spots. But we can finally move on to the decorating for resident services. So for anyone who decided to skip the pathing, well, welcome back. And we're going through right now and I'm deciding that I want to encase resident services in with the simple panel and fence duo that I have been using around the island. I have my simple panels customized to have this adorable little springtime vine mesh fence look on them, and I'm layering them with actual fences so that way we can take up a full tile since both of these items are a half tile, and we can cover up the unsightly lines of the cliff face that is behind resident services. My idea with all of this is that I wanted to have a cliff behind resident services so that way we could utilize some of the skyline above to make it look like a more fleshed out urban center with maybe some skyscrapers, some skylines, whatever you'd like to call it. But I also just really love encasing resident services whenever I'm working on an urban island. I feel like it makes a lot of sense and it really helps to make resident services feel like its own area. It does make things a little difficult when you're trying to navigate because all of my villagers are in baby jail whenever they want to hang out in the plaza, and it makes getting to the plaza very difficult because you'll see when we decorate the pathway into resident services, it's very tight, it's very narrow, and these villagers got in my way so much. Oh my goodness, I felt like such a bully having to push them out the way so often. But now we are getting on to the fun stuff, which is decorating in front of resident services, and I really love how this area turns out. It is so cozy and so pretty and full of so much fun texture and foliage. I went into this part with the mindset of going through and creating a tree-lined path leading taking you into the town square and up to the resident services building. And I just really love the closed in and really full and luscious view that this area gives. I also really like the idea of placing 2 trees with enough space in between for the plain party lights arch to go in between, because it makes it look like there are lights strung up through the trees. It's such a beautiful little trick to hide the posts behind the trees themselves. So I really wanted to do that here. I felt like it fit for this island very well, and the cherry blossom trees are just absolutely gorgeous, of course, but you saw that I went through and I put some plant partitions on either side to really just close it in. And now we're just going through and laying down some municipal clutter along the roadside. We have some street lights, we have a little public park bench, but now we are moving on to the left side of the plaza here. And I gotta be totally honest with you guys, this area gave me so much trouble. Oh my goodness, it was just such a weird size. It's really narrow and it's big enough that it needed something, but small enough that I couldn't put a giant build. So I decided to do a little food truck filler spot right here. And this is a little bakery food truck selling some baked pastries and breads and goods. And I just love how this area turned out so much. I think it's so stinking cute. I loved going through and doing a different color scheme, doing the yellow and the purple here. I feel like they are a really great combination, being contrasting colors, and it brought a fun pop to this area that wasn't just green or pink. But now we're moving on to the parking lot area to the right hand side, and we just put down a little scooter. We have the pink mini car, which I can only imagine Isabel drives, as well as the luxury car, which of course, Tom Nook himself driving this gas guzzler. You cannot convince me that the luxury car takes anything but premium. I know this man is putting 120 bells into his gas tank every single time he goes to the gas station, and you cannot convince me that that dude does anything that is good for the environment. So of course he would drive a gas guzzler. But now I'm going through and just trying to fill out the areas off to the side here. I really wanted to bring some symmetry to both sides, so I'm going through and mirroring some of the stuff that we did above the parking lot before moving down to the southern area of this build. So this is where things kind of connect a little bit with our entrance area. So of course we have the cliff face showing, and if you know me, you know that I do not like to have these types of things visible, especially on a city court island. So I'm going through and using some wide display stands to fill in those areas. And even though it makes this spot look a little bit closed in, I really like the look of the wide display stands on this island. Things are a bit more modern, so going through and lining the cliff face with this is a great way to not only take up some space, but also just make these areas look more polished overall. I really like the effect that it gives to these little tiny spots, and it's these smaller details that really bring builds like this together. But I'm going through now and lining the end of the street with some hardwood trees, just because I feel like it brings some nice texture to this spot. Once again, we are working towards breaking up the monotony of these roadways here, so this is a great way to do that. And I just decided to do another plain party lights arch to bring in the ties to the resident services walkway. And now we get to try and fill in the sides of this area. So this was kind of a difficult battle that I undertook, trying to figure out how to fill in this basically 1 tile wide road. The sidewalk itself is only 1 tile wide on each side for the most part, with the road itself being too small for us to put any major cars without blocking up too much space. So I just decided to try and keep it as municipal as possible. We'll go through, do a little telephone booth as you saw, do a fire hydrant, add some trees, and of course tons of street lamps. I didn't really like the round street lamps when I first saw them in the 2.0 update, but honestly, after using them, I think that they're so cute. I think they really just suit a certain island type, and if it's not the type of theme that you're working for, then it's just not the type of streetlight that's gonna look good on your island. But I feel like they look really good for a kid core, city core island, because they're not like super elegant, they're not super fancy, they almost kind of look goofy, they remind me of bubbles, so I think they look really, really cute lining all of the roads. But of course, adding a couple more trees, and then we're going to be lining the rest of the roads and sidewalks in this area. I tried to keep it somewhat minimal because I still wanted you to be able to walk around in this area, but of course, like I said, I had to add all of these symmetrical street lamps wherever I could. And now we are putting on the final touches for the roadway itself. I just decided to do 1 car because I didn't want too many cars taking up too much space, but now we are moving on to an area that I am so excited for you guys to see. This little spot right here is going to to be a public dog park. I am so happy with how this whole area turned out. I was really inspired by a build that I saw over on Kaylee Games' channel, one of my YouTube besties. As always, you know her, you love her. But she worked on a Halloween 30-day island challenge for her island of Cobweb. And on that island, I believe she had a dog park. And when I first saw that, I was like, I would like to try to do a dog park somewhere. So this is the perfect island for us to put one. I feel like the items that we have for dog parks in game, or at least ones that you could try to string together for a dog park, are very cutesy, almost toy-like, especially because a lot of the items that I end up using are actually toys, like the dog plushies. But this area is so stinking cute. We are starting out by laying down a dirt pathway here. I feel like if you go to an actual dog park, usually the grass is kind of worn down because the dogs, if they have zoomies, they just be running around like crazy. So I decided to put a little dirt patch here instead of the grass. I just feel like it makes this area look a bit more established as a municipal spot. But then we're going to go through and add some pink park fencing around here. It's giving Barbie Dreamland. It's giving Ginger and Barbie are going for a walk, and I absolutely love it. It's giving Nintendogs, and I just seriously could not be happier with how this whole area turned out. It's very pink, it's very cutesy. I don't know if I've ever seen a pink dog park in real life, but this is Tamagotchi after all. This is Tamatown. We do not have to live by real life reason. We are just living based off of vibes alone. But honestly, working on builds like this are the reason why Tamagotchi has been so much fun to put together, because there's so much stuff that I have built that I wouldn't normally build, and it's all being done in a style that just feels like such a breath of fresh air. It does make sense, I guess, since this is a spring island, so giving myself something fresh and something new to work with is definitely very much in the spirit of spring. But these different areas with the bright colors and the different design style has just been so refreshing and really given me so much inspiration in the game. So this is your little note from me to possibly try working on an island in a style that you might not have originally gravitated towards, because it has brought me so much newfound inspiration and motivation to work on islands in Animal Crossing. But I'm going through now and adding the different clutter items to the actual dog park itself. So we have the little dog plushies, which I think are so cute. There's so many different variations for coat colors as well. So it was really fun to try and puzzle piece them together. I also added some lawn chairs so that maybe there's a spot for some owners to come and hang out and chat. And of course, we had to put a little dog house for the dogs to go hang out in. There isn't really that many items that I could have added. It's a dog park, so I wanted to try and add dog themed items, but we didn't have very many in game. I decided to pair the bath bucket with a puddle design code to make it look like water bowls that the dogs are being quite messy with. And with a couple of little items and some trees, it kind of pulls the entire area together, turns some dogs on for some fun movement and noise, and that is everything for the dog park. We are now going to this little teeny tiny area beneath the dog park, another spot a lot like the left side of resident services, where I was like, what the heck am I going to put down here? So I just decided to keep it simple and have a little kind of like public patio area. Maybe you went to the food truck, you ordered yourself a little slice of a peach tart, and you now need someplace to go and sit and munch on the yummy snacks that you decided to get at Meringue's food truck. So I just set up some tables with some froggy chairs, and I really like how this spot turned out. It's very simple, but it's very cute. I'm going through and doing the same simple panel and fence trick. This is officially my new favorite trick for whenever I want to kind of close in an area. It was really fun to do this next to the beach as well, and I'm very excited to decorate the beaches on this island. I don't decorate the beach in today's video, but I will in the future, and I'm very excited. I have all of the beaches planned out. If this is the first time you're ever tuning in to a video on my channel, just know that I do decorate all of my beaches fully, so stay tuned, especially if you're someone who is looking for beach decoration ideas. But I'm going through now and layering the iron fence with some street lights just to give this area a bit of a boundary. It's always really difficult trying to end cap the coastline with the actual beach. It's such a tough spot. But now we are finally moving on to the Able Sisters build. I decided to try and keep this one somewhat simple as well. I wasn't going to try and turn Able's into something that it's not. I decided to do a little clothing store, especially because we have so many cute clothing items in game now after the 2.0 update. So I'm going through and trying to piece them together and build somewhat of like an outdoor storefront. This spot looks so cool. I've had so much fun making faux buildings and extensions for pre-existing buildings in the game, and it's really just pushed me to try different design ideas for some of these builds in game, and I just love it so much. This area came together so fast, and this was one of the spots that you guys helped me with over on Twitch. So once again, thank you to the besties that came and hung out with us, because I couldn't have done it without you. This area area really came together with y'all's help. But I decided that off to the right side of Abel's, I wanted to have a little area for the girly pops to hang out and work on some sewing projects. Miss Judy decided to plop her booty down and hang out with me for a second, but she did not get in my way, thankfully, as I went through and filled out the little sewing tea spot, which I love to add next to Abel's because, of course, you have to give a spot for them to hang out. Even though they never leave the buildings, I wish they did, like during closing time, or maybe if there was like different hours for different days, the NPCs would come out of their buildings and walk around the town. I think that would be so freaking fun. I doubt they'll ever add that in a future game, but I think it could be really cool. But now I'm going through and trying to figure out how to decorate the areas at the border of Abel's. It was really hard with all these kind of like funky nubs that I had at the side of the build, but I decided to just try and bring some foliage, kind of bring the nature into these spots without taking space away from the inner tiles. But yeah, I'm just going through and trying to clutter up these spots, trying to layer a lot of different types of items so that everything stays interesting and keeps it visually fresh. Now, I will say I did have another struggle in this spot trying to figure out how far I wanted Abel's to come forward. I didn't really want Abel's to go all the way to the beach line, so I decided to create this kind of faux border here with some plant partitions and some wooden partitions, which I feel like look so gorgeous when paired together. And this way Abel's feels like its own kind of secluded spot, and then you have another kind of little public park area in front. I don't know if I would necessarily consider this a park, but it's still really cute, and I feel like it kind of connects well with the patio area off to the left hand side. We're gonna place a little cruiser bike here because I'm assuming maybe someone parked a bike to go do some clothes shopping, and we're gonna add our finishing touches to this little area, try to fill it in a little bit more, and go back down to work on these little offshoot nubbin spots again. It's really hard once again to get that transition going between the more established areas and the more natural spots where the coastline kind of does its weird dips and things like that. But we're going to add some final touches right here. We're going to put down a street light, and that's pretty much going to finish off this bottom area right here after a couple more little clutter pieces. I like to do a lot of little leaf piles and things like that, so that way you have fun stuff to walk through, and it brings a lot of texture and just whimsy to the area to finally cap everything off. Some park fences to bring in those pink vibes. Now, I really like using the steel fences along the edge of the coastline here. It's been so nice using those because of the fact that you can really push them up along the edge, and they're short enough that they don't take up too much sightline. Sometimes it gets frustrating using the endgame fencing because the fact that it sits square in the middle of the tile, like, oh my goodness, it's so frustrating because you can't really decorate super close to fences. I really only like to use the endgame fences if it is a forward facing fence, if that makes sense. Like if you're looking down on it instead of looking at the side of the fencing, because I feel like it's the only time that the fencing looks like it's sitting in a natural spot. But fence rant aside, I'm going through and filling in these tiny little transition spots that will bring us on to the future beach builds that we will be doing. I also have this cute little beach entrance spot right here, which once again kind of gives you an example of what I mean with the fences, with looking down on a fence instead of looking at the side of a fence. It looks so much more natural in those spots. But we are officially working on the final area of resident services. This final spot is going to encompass this right hand corner as well as the upper cliff face, which we will get to in just a moment. But I'm going through and making what I imagine are some condo buildings or some apartment buildings that are going to be overlooking a little public park. Now, this public park will not be interactable. It's more for just some beautiful sight lines, but I was very inspired by a build I saw by, I believe, Horrible Gaming. I will put the picture here on screen for you guys to look at, but this build was breathtaking. I knew I wanted to try and do something similar in my own style, so I took the bones of this build and tried to recreate them in this tiny little corner. It is not quite the same. I think Horrible Gaming did so much better of a job with the build that she put together, but I tried, you know, and that's all you can do sometimes. And I didn't realize until after doing the build that the one that she had done was technically a lookout area, and the actual little fountain spot was underneath where the picture was taken. So I was wondering why the proportions were a little messed up, but at the same time, it's okay because I really like how this spot turned out. I feel like even though it's not quite what I originally envisioned it to be, it fits within the context of Tamagotchi, and I love it so much. And it's little things like that that make finding inspiration but reinterpreting them to fit on your own island so important. And I had so much fun working on this little spot. I will say it was quite an endeavor to try and find a tile that would match in this area. this almost looks more like a little like kids play mat than it does a tile, but at the end of the day, this is a kid core island, so I guess it fits. But now we are just going through and placing these finishing touches. I decided a cute little seating area would be the perfect way to really enjoy this spot. So I decorated it with some flower beds, I turned on some music, and we have a few benches so that way there is a spot to come and hang out and enjoy the vibes before we move on to the upper area above resident services. And now my goal with this spot was to create an interesting skyline that can be viewed from down below, and to also really try and give the town hall building some depth and integrate it into a city core design style. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I really struggle with decorating behind resident services. I think it's the thing that I struggle with the most, and I've found that my decorating comfort zone often lies in trying to make sure that there's a really hard distinction between resident services and whatever build I'm putting behind it. So it usually leads me to using things like the rivers or terraforming to create a really hard edge that will separate the space. I decided that utilizing the second tier to create a row of shops, including the florist that we are working on right now, as well as a bakery that you'll see in a moment, and using these same apartment style simple panels to act as some vibrant little condos would be a great way to take up some of the sight lines and to make this urban area look a lot more full. I had a lot of fun playing with the different ways to puzzle piece all of these items together to create an interesting looking set of shops and homes. I will admit, working on these faux buildings has been so much fun on this island. And I also will say that when you look at these buildings from down below, it's kind of hard to see them. You more so get little bits and pieces here and there, but I think it's pretty fun to get these little snippets instead of seeing the full thing. I feel like it incentivizes you to explore the island a bit more. But now we are going through and placing some medieval sidewalls so that way we can have some roofing in this area and really make these buildings look a bit more complete. But with this, these are going to be the finishing touches that we are putting on the final area of the build. So without further ado, let us go and enjoy the beauty shots. Alrighty, my bunny besties, that is everything for today's speed build, and as always, I can't wait to hear what your favorite part of the build was down in the comment section below. I hope that this video was well worth the wait, and just know that I am so inspired to keep creating on this island that the time between uploads will not nearly be as long this time around, I promise. And if this is the first video of mine that you are seeing, consider subscribing today to join our cozy community, as we would love to have you around. And for those that are looking for more Bunby Animal Crossing content in between uploads, consider stopping by our live streams over on Twitch at Cozy Bunby to see some sneak peeks at the builds that we have before they come to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching all the way to the end. Leave a little bunny emoji down below so that I know you are a real one who got to this spot, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye friends!